the risk is now allocated between the client, the contractor, and sometimes the project manager. A contract is normally between the client and the contractor. However, sometimes you get a middleman who's either a project manager or a consultant, but there's no contract between the contractor and him. He just acts as a middleman, right? And similarly, you get a project manager as well, who's, if he's a third-party project manager, he acts just as a middleman as well. Right, as we said, the consultant or the project manager is just an agent. The 6 basic types of contract: ad measure, a lump sum contract, cost reimbursable, the target cost, a management, and a day work. Now, the most common is the first one, which is a bill of quantities type of contract, whereby we have a bill, and normally the contractor would price each item. There's a quantity, there's a rate, and that is extended to give us a price. So for argument's sake, let's say you want to lay 15 bricks at 10 Rand each. So it'll be the lay bricks, quantity 15, you put your rate 10 Rand, the extended price will be 150 Rand, 10 times 15. Now in that way, you'll notice it's the most fairest of them all, in the sense that if you had to lay 20 bricks, you'll now get 20 times 10 Rand, which is 200 Rand. So the bill of quantities, that's why they call it ad measure. It's subject to measure. It's subject to measure at a later stage. Right. Now, then looking at the next type. The next type is a lump sum contract. And the lump sum contract, as the word says, the contractor is allowed to price on the work, but he doesn't have, sorry, 1 second, class. Sorry, I need, just 1 second, sorry. Sorry about that, class. Okay, right, the lump sum, sorry. As I said, what the contractor would do now, the contractor and the client, they'll agree on an amount. Let's say you want to build a house. Both look at the house, the drawings and so on, and they agree, right, the contractor is going to charge you 250,000 to build that house. So that's a lump sum. And generally the lump sum is not subject to change. In other words, you quoted the sum, and let's say for argument's sake, you had to lay 10 extra bricks, you can't then go and claim for it. Right, that's how the lump sum works. Then you get the cost reimbursable, and commonly referred to cost plus. And the basics around that is the contractor would and the client would agree that all the materials will be purchased, the labor will be taken into account, your plant, everything, and that will be, we'll work out what the cost is, and the client would pay the contractor maybe 10% over and above that. That's what they mean by cost plus. So you work out what your cost is actually on the job, and let's say you settle for 15% profit. So the cost came to 115,000, your cost plus. Then you got the target cost contract. A target cost is where the client and the contractor would agree. They know that generally we got this house to build, and we know that the house is going to be completed in 3 months' time, and they would work out what the price of the materials is going to be in 3 months' time. But remember, today it might be cheaper. 3 months' time, when you're going to actually start or finish the job, it's going to be a lot more expensive, and they work. That's why target cost, and then you decide on a profit as well on that. And then management contract, where the client would basically allow the contractor to work according to the project manager. The project manager will tell the contractor what's to be done, and they get paid based on that. That's why it's a management contract, because generally some projects, especially if you're going to be working underground or you're going to be digging pipes and relaying them and so on, you can't see what's going on. So that's why the management contract comes into play, the way you'll have a project manager who will tell you, okay, today you removed 50 meters of pipe, or we damaged 2 cables that were underground, and that kind of thing, and the cost is based on what is underground, because above ground you can see and you can price. Underground generally is very difficult. And the day is straightforward. The contractor would work on a daily basis. He'll say at 10 labor today, this is all the materials that are purchased, that's the plant that I used, and so on. And you get paid based on, the contractor gets paid based on what was executed for the day, right? And then tomorrow, whatever he does, he gets paid for that. The following day, if he doesn't rock up because obviously there were no materials on site or something, he won't get paid for that day. That's how the day actually works, right? Then the last type, which is the negotiated. The negotiated contract is fairly straightforward, where the client and the contractor would start sitting at the table and saying, hey, listen, for that house, I'm going to charge you 250. The client would say, hey, I think 250 a bit stiff, man. Can't we make it 225? And the contractor will say, 225 is going to, that's my profit getting swallowed there. Let's make it 235, and so on. You negotiate. Once you come to a firm deal, that is a binding contract thereafter, right? It will be binding. So that's basically what negotiated contract means. Tender documents. The first document is what we refer to as an instruction to tender. And on the instruction to tender, you'll get information. They could be posted in the newspaper. It could be on the internet. It could be just a piece of paper that's typed out and hanging on your notice board. But generally, there is an instruction to tender where it will tell you the date and time when the tenders will close, the date and time when site inspections are being carried out, and so forth. Then it also, most contracts will give you a condition of contract. What we use in civil engineering is what we refer to as the GCC, the general conditions of contract for civil engineering works. And anything that deviates from that must be noted in the document, right? Like your risk and transfer, sharing, and so on. Tender documents also include the description of works, a basic scope of the works, telling you what the work entails. Construction of a brick and tiled house that's going to be 460 square meters on land that's 1,580 square meters, and so on, things like that. Then also the BOQ must be included, and generally you'll notice that normally for anything that might be out of the ordinary. For example, most of our civil engineering works are priced in according with your SABS 1200, where each operation is where the operations are specified. But if anything is different, for example, we know most buildings would require a strip foundation. Your houses will require a strip foundation, but we know some of them, especially the RDP and the low-cost houses, they just go for what they call a raft foundation. In other words, the floor acts as a foundation, where the floor is cast and the brickwork goes from there. So in a case like you need to specify that in the BOQ, that is going to be different from the ordinary. Then you get an estimate versus tender. Now, what an estimate is, the client, when he draws up the document, he would normally do an estimate of what the cost is going to be for the project. And then when he get the tenders come in other words, than the contractor's price, straight away he can immediately set aside those that are out of the range. Let's say the client estimated a job to be 1 million, and now you get a guy that comes in at 50,000. You know there's something wrong. You agree? He's either doesn't know what he's doing or he made a mathematical error. You'll put that aside immediately. Same tune, if you estimated 1 million and you got a guy that comes in at 25 million, it's again, you know, he's either too greedy or he made a mistake somewhere along the line. So you'll set that aside as well. You won't include those in your adjudication. Adjudication is when you start reviewing all the prices that came in. Then you look at your direct cost. Now, direct costs are all the costs that are related to that project, in other that contract. Then you also get indirect costs. Indirect costs are things like your rent for your premises, your telephone, whereby you're sharing that for a number of rent, but it's shared between different projects. Then you get site overheads, what we refer to as on cost. Now, right, on cost is things like, as I said, your water, your electricity that you need to get to the site. Those are on cost because that is not really related to the direct cost of the project, but it would have to be built into the project cost. Right, then you get various types of tender processes. The first one being open tender. Open tender means anyone and everybody is allowed to tender on that. Right, open tender where you advertise in the paper or on the internet or somewhere, and everyone can, but not all will be considered for adjudication. You don't have to. Obviously, you get some fly-by-nights or some chances that you're immediately disqualified. Then you get selected tenders where now you pick people, especially if it's a specialized, where it's specialized, you may want to select who you want to do the job. Now, if it's a bridge building, you aren't going to give it to a guy that only knows how to do fencing. You agree? So that you'll select, you'll pick up all the guys that are experienced in bridge building and so on. Pre-qualified tenders, exactly the same thing where you have a database of people that have done work for you before, and you know these tenderers are good guys. They haven't given us much problem. They did the work according to the spec and so on. You might want to invite them to tender. And then we said the last one is negotiated tenders, where same story, you select a couple of guys and you tell them, give me a price. And then the one guy comes in at 200,000, the other guy comes in at 400,000 and so on. You tell the guy at 200,000, hey, you sure that that's going to be the right price? Because according to our estimate, it was 300,000. So I'm not sure you're going to do it. If you can't do it, just review it. If you can't, let us know. And then we'll negotiate with the guy with 400,000 if he can do it at 300,000 for us. That's how it works. But if the guy at 200,000 said, hey, no, listen, I made a mistake, it's 300,000, you don't want to give him the job now. Eh? You can't. You have to give it to somebody that was more than the price. But you just want to know, hey, are you right? Or you still insist you want to do it at 200,000. If you still insist, we'll give him the work. If he's legitimate and experienced tender as well. Advertising, generally, as I said, you'll advertise in the paper, in the press, or on the internet and so on. But you must indicate the location of the project, what is the scope of the work, and the timing of when the project is going to start, tenders close, the validity period of the tender, and so on, who the employer is, and who's going to be the consulting engineer if you do have one. Okay, tender documents, I think we looked at that. Basically, the tender documents should have no ambiguity in it. It shouldn't have any ambiguity because that's what causes problem at the later stage. Excuse me. Site inspection in the document or even on the advert, you normally specify when a site inspection and whether it's going to be compulsory or not. Compulsory site inspection, if the tenderer didn't attend, is immediately disqualified. Even though he submits his tender, is immediately disqualified. If it's not a compulsory, then obviously you can't blame him if he didn't attend. And some nowadays, what they specify is that when you're sending a representative to the site inspection, the representative must have a good knowledge of the scope of the work. Because quite often what happens is with the tenders, a guy will send his tea lady just to the contractor, to the site inspection just to sign the register. And she doesn't know anything that's going on, and a lot of information is discussed at the site inspection. So that's why nowadays they say that your representative must have a good knowledge of the scope of the area of works. Tender openings, normally tenders may be open in public or may be open privately. Now, public opening is as soon as tenders close, all the prospective tenders are allowed to come into a room and they open and they call out the name of the contractor and the price. That is a public opening. Tender adjudication, this is a process that takes place after tender opening, and this is done privately, normally in the chambers of the council or in the chambers of the client, and they discuss, they look at all the prices, they look at the contractor itself, his track record and so on, and then finally they come up with who's the most prospective tenderer. Right, I think class, we're going to leave it at that because the rest are basically what we repeated. Decision to tender, you can go through that. right? There are a number of things that one would look at before you tender, right? It continues, most of it is on decision to tender, right? There are a number of things you can go through. It's fairly straightforward, right? Like, for example, if you look at who the client is going to be, who the consultant, where the site is, what work is involved. If you got no experience in that work, don't waste your time tendering, because you might shoot yourself in the foot, right? Then other things include the price range. If the price range is going to be out of your budget, because remember, quite often you, with civil engineering works, that's how it works. You have to call for the funds to start the work, and you only get paid upon the first claim that you put. Then who's the contractors, subcontractors that are nominated? Nominated subcontractors are those that are allocated by the client. If it's not nominated, then you can choose subcontractors. What is the type of contract that's going to be used, whether you're GCC or what's the general conditions of contract, what form is used, what tender adjudication, when is the likely completion date, when is tenders closing, all that will tell you whether you should tender or not. How long is the tender period? What is the tender validity period? Tender period is how long you're allowed to price that document. From the time you attend the site meeting till the time tenders close. Tender validity period is after you submit your price, your tender must be valid for a period, normally up to 90 days at least, right? Because it takes a while to adjudicate and so on. What are the penalties? For every day that you're late, if you're going to be paying 20,000 a day and your profit margin is very small, in other words, you're only making 500 Rand a day, then it might not be feasible for you to do that. Performance bond, what we refer to as a guarantee? You have to provide a guarantee. When you start a contract, you default, the client can use that guarantee. Guarantee is like a deposit that you put, right, to start the work. And what are the special conditions of contract? Okay, and still carrying on, it's the same thing that basically was in the tabulated form. You can just go through the decision to tender. Okay, material prices, subcontractors. Okay, same thing, all was there, just a little bit more detail basically on each one of those. Tender process. Right, class, I'm going to leave it at that for now. Any questions, class? Any questions quickly? Anyone? Any questions? Okay. Class, quickly. Have any of you managed to download your notes from the Moodle site? Anyone?
Yes, we've got the notes.
Okay, but for those of you that don't know, the notes are on the Moodle. Make sure you download the notes. And class, in future, we'll use this link, right? You're going to use this link to join the rest of the classes. You'll notice that this link here says Construction Management 3A, Construction MGMT 3A, and the other link was just, I think it was CM 3A or something. Don't use that, use this full link here. Okay. Okay, thank you, class. We'll see you okay on the Monday. I told you the Monday is normally a tutorial lecture, but I haven't got into any tutorials now, so we'll just go through it on Monday quickly, whatever we need to do. Okay, thank you very much, class.